the initial state, if you just before you fall asleep, to generate the wish, may I be of benefit to all sentient beings, may my sleep vitalize me to such a degree I be of greater benefit to others, right? With this kind of loving attitude, then your sleep will also become virtuous. While if you fall asleep with an angry, aggressive side of mind, you don't sleep as well. On top of that, you may have really weird dreams, but it's also your whole sleep becomes non-virtuous. So it's always good, it's just like before we die. It's important to have a virtuous state of mind before we die, but our sleep at night, sleeping, is very similar to death. Similar, we go through a similar process, and so it makes sense that before we fall asleep, we generate virtue. So sleep is changeable in that it can be virtuous, non-virtuous, or just neutral. Regret, regret is funny. Regret is funny because, when you give a lot of money to someone, okay? I say that jokingly, but it's so true. If you're generous, you need to have wisdom. Because if you give too much, then the money is gone, and if you regret it, the virtue is gone. Both the money's gone and the virtue is gone. So be careful, right? Either you've given and just say, wonderful, I gave that much, never mind. Don't regret it, because then you have a double loss. Money is gone, plus the virtue is gone. So just be careful when you give. Don't give too much. Make sure you don't generate the regret. Always be careful about that. So to think, is this feel right? Does it feel right or not? And then you give then. Like I said, because otherwise the non-virtue. And you don't want... The virtue is most important when you give. Alright. So, regret is a mental factor that feels remorse for physical, verbal or mental actions done in the past. So if you regret something positive, then the regret is non-virtuous. If you regret something neutral, it's neutral. If you regret something negative, the regret is positive. And not guilt. Right? I've lived too long with the Tibetans. This thing, the idea of guilt, I've been told 1 year that some people feel they shouldn't be happy because they feel guilty because other people are not. Have you ever heard that? You have a personal responsibility to be happy. In fact, to want to benefit others, you need to be happy. Why? Because if you're not happy, you're not relaxed. If you're not happy, you don't have the same energy. So you need to be happy to make others happy. If you're a depressed person, you can't make others happy. I feel you have a personal responsibility to be happy. We have a personal responsibility to be calm and relaxed, because when we are in our dealing with others, right? Everyone likes to be around a happy person. Everyone is inspired, and if you're happy and you make an effort to being happy, and that is through virtue, then people will ask you, well, how did you get there? And they may be inspired to do the same. You have a personal responsibility to be happy. So this idea that you shouldn't be happy because others are not. No, because they're not, you need to be. Because then eventually you will be able to possibly help them. It's not about making them jealous. Oh, I'm happy and you're not. No, it's about once you have that happy state, then you have the space of mind to be with them, to help them, etc. So like a healthy doctor, it's only a healthy doctor can cure others. It's the same idea. And also this guilt thing. Regret is the healthy version. Guilt is the extreme version. Remember I talked about the extreme version of something in the normal? Regret is like, made a mistake. Okay, that was wrong. I see that. I'll try my best to not do it again. Move on. Oh, I'm so bad. What did I do? That's totally useless. Right? So to remind yourself, that's just extreme. Let go. I've made a mistake. I learned from this mistake. Move on. Right? So Tibetans don't have a problem with guilt. There's not actually a word in Tibetan. They have regret, but they don't have that issue with guilt. It's the Judeo-Christian tradition, I think. Right? Yeah. Okay. Sleep, I said, regret, okay. Investigation, well, here investigation, like a general investigation or a detailed analysis. General investigation, depending on the object, can be positive, negative, or virtuous. Same true detailed analysis. You plan a murder, you plan a war, depending on your motivation, positive, virtuous, etc. Okay. Now the very last bit, stop time, the very last bit you may find interesting because it's about coarse and subtle minds. This, I think, is quite interesting. So allow me to just read it, and then we're done. And I won't just read it, I'll kind of explain and read it together. So if you want to follow the book, otherwise never mind. So there's also a presentation of coarse and subtle minds, which is actually given in the Tantric scriptures, in the Tantric tradition of Mahayana Buddhism. Now, as you may remember, Tantra is just a technique. It's a technique. Based on the fact that we have different levels of consciousness. So Tantra deals specifically with these different levels of consciousness. In general, there are 3 levels of consciousness. Gross, subtle, and very subtle. What's the Hebrew for gross, subtle, and very subtle?
Gas, adin, ve'odadin.
Ve'odadin. Okay. Alright, gross is gas?
Gas.
Gas. Okay. Gas, alright. Our normal waking minds, while we're awake right now, such as the 5 sense consciousnesses and the mental consciousness, they're gross, they're gas. The awarenesses that are always present when we're awake. So while we're awake, they perceive the 5 sense objects, they think, they judge, they reflect, etc. Gross in the sense easily recognizable, but also disrupted. Our gross awarenesses rely heavily on our physical body, especially on the brain. Okay? Any alteration or even damage to the brain, so for example, when suffering from a stroke or brain injuries, has an inevitable effect on the coarse mind, on the gross or coarse mind. It has an effect on it. On the other hand, any change and transformation of the mind also affects the brain and possibly the entire body. Like I said, there's this research now, how mental states affect the body, the neurons, making new connections. Oh, I tell you my favorite story. Last year was pretty much my favorite story. So I kind of forgotten about it throughout this year. But the coarse mind, of course, depends on the brain. And the brain depends on the coarse mind. But the mind does not depend on the gross mind the way we may think. Because there's a story of a little boy in England. There's a boy, he was born with only 10% of a brain. Some of you remember me telling you about it. So there's a documentary made about this little boy. He was also paralyzed, but he was paralyzed because there was a problem with his spine. That has nothing to do with the fact he couldn't walk or cannot walk, had nothing to do with that. There was a problem with his spine. But he was born with only 10% of a brain. So they did a brain scan, and you can tell it was nothing in the center. It's just at the outside. And the parents, the doctors, when they did the scan, still in the womb, they said to the parents, well, you better abort the child. There's no brain. And the parents said, no, we don't want to abort this child. We'll let it live. And so the little boy was born. But he was pretty much like other boys. He wasn't that different. So he acted like a baby acts. Right? He wasn't like in a vegetative state or anything. And the doctors also recommended to train the boy in terms of like kind of brain exercises, specific brain exercises. And so they did. And the boy he grew up and he learned to speak. He learned to communicate, 10% of a brain. And doctors didn't know how, but the child developed. And at some point they did a brain scan and they found that his brain had started to grow. 96% of his brain grew. Now this is in a documentary, it shows you the scans, it shows you matter of fact, it's no one believing in body and mind, blah, blah, nothing of that. It's just, it was a phenomenon. Right? And so it shows, this is Dharmakirti. There is the proof. Dharmakirti has said it. Mind can exist without brain. This boy was able to do the same things when he was born with this little bit of brain he had. He was still like a normal baby. Secondly, the mind created the brain. Because because of these exercises, those physical exercises, somehow the non-physical entity of the mind was able to make the mind, the brain grow, where otherwise it would have come from. And now he's pretty normal, except he's in a wheelchair, but he's this active little boy. The shape of his body is a little funny, but the shape of his father's body, head shape is also a little funny. So first I was like, he has a funny head shape. And that's what the father thought. Well, he does too. So it may just be something inherited. So it's kind of elongated a little bit. But other than that, he's this cute little boy with this little wheelchair. He's kind of like wheeling around. So, wow. Okay, some food for thought. Is it is it mind over body? Is it body over mind? So from a Buddhist point of view, it's more our mind creates our brain. Our mind creates our brain. And we haven't learned to control this yet. But some of the great meditators, like I told you before, I met some people, they're unbelievable, like these lamas. They're unbelievable. Like they have clairvoyant powers that blows you off. Like it's amazing. Many times I told people, I had just become a nun in the early 90s. At that time, I needed to get a visa from Nepal. Just this story. From Nepal, I needed to get a visa. And I went to see this Lama, who's known for his clairvoyant ability. So I said to him, I have to go to Nepal. When should I go to get the visa? And he said, go tonight. And I'm like, no, I don't want to go tonight. It's really hot. He's like, you want to get the visa? You go tonight, otherwise forget it. Right? Okay, so I got a train ticket, last seat in the bus. Everything was horrible. Horrible trip. I get there, I come back, and when I get back to India, Rajiv Gandhi gets assassinated. Everything closed. No longer any visas. I don't think he was part of the assassination. So somehow he knew, and he told me exactly when to go. And this is just one example of hundreds of examples. So the ability of training your mind that you can know things that are beyond what we think is ordinary, because the mind has the ability to know. Or Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who no longer sleeps. He doesn't sleep. Like I said before, one time he gave a teaching the whole night. And then he said, until 4 o'clock he taught us. He was fit as a fiddle. We were like, and he said, okay, go home for an hour. I have to do my practice. Come back, I'll continue teaching. When we got back, he was still doing his prayers, he was doing his meditation. He said, okay, come back in. He kept teaching until like 8 o'clock. Then he said, okay, I now have to say goodbye to a few people, so you can wait or do whatever you want to do. So we were like, totally spaced out. We hadn't slept the whole night. Rinpoche was going here and there and meeting this person and that person. Seriously, you can't fake that. Right? You really can't fake it. You can't fake being fresh when you're not. And he went to this person, and then around 3 o'clock, Rinpoche then left Dharamsala and went, and he was just as fit. We were like comatose. I mean, we were like half in a coma. We were so tired. So you can see this. You can see this. The next thing is, and this is prescribed in here, there are meditators that after they die, they're in a meditative state. They are dead. But they don't move on. So one of my teachers was like that. He had died in the summer. He was 80 years old. Not like a huge surprise. He was 80 years old. He died. He died in a hospital. But what he did was he utilized his death and meditated on the very subtle mind. At the time of death, it's called a clear light mind. It's responsible for seeing this clear light, or having that perception of a clear light. That is the mind you utilize to meditate. It's a very advanced practice, highly effective. So he started meditating, he did that meditation, and when you do that, you're dead, but you don't start to decay, because the subtle mind has not left the body yet. For ordinary people, either it immediately leaves or within 3 days. 3 days is the longest. It leaves the body and the body starts to decay. Not every corpse decays right away, right? Some not right away because the subtle mind is still in the body. But for a meditator, they can go on for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Now you may say, oh yeah, that's just a story. But I saw him. He was dead. And it was in the monsoon. The humidity in the monsoon is 90%. Wow, I mean, just lifting your arm and you sweat. It's terribly hot, terribly humid. And so he was in a hospital, and he was in a meditative posture, and we had to recite prayers to assist him in the way, though he couldn't hear it, but it's said to just the positive energy of these prayers is said to be positive, benefiting him. So he meditated for a week. And seriously, I was like, every time he came I gave it a good sniff, because seriously, if you have a corpse in a room at that temperature and that humidity, whoa! After 3-4 days, the stink becomes unbearable. That's just what it is. That's why people are cremated very soon. No smell. 5 days, 6 days, 7 days, no smell. I mean, he was dead. You can tell. It's not like, no, okay. Not like that. He was not breathing, right? His face was covered with a cloth, just for privacy, but the body was visible. And it was a dead body. No movement, nothing. But the mind is still in the body, and no decay takes place. And I saw this for myself twice, actually. Twice. But that time I had the opportunity, because it was one of our teachers, we had to do prayers. And so we had the opportunity to be around him for hours. And first it was like, you're a corpse. But then he wasn't a corpse really yet. The subtle mind was still there. So how do you explain that? And now with modern science, Dalai Lama has asked that at that hospital where this teacher was at, the Tibetan hospital, that they have machines to actually measure what is happening. And they've already done that in the West. And they found that there's a little bit of warmth at the heart, which is where the subtle mind is located. That's it. So you see, this is what is possible. And if you witness it, only if you witness it, you really believe in that. But this refers to this here. See? So there's so much we can do with this mind. We have this incredible mind. We're like sitting on a diamond, right? We're sitting like, we're like in a house with a diamond underneath. Not even looking at the diamond and suffering from famine. That's what we're like. We have this incredible mind. All right, but allow me to read this last part. In general, there are 3 levels of consciousness. Okay, so our gross awarenesses rely heavily on our body, on the brain. But, as I said, so conversely, any change and transformation of the mind also affects the brain and possibly the entire body. The majority of our afflictions, such as ignorance, anger, etc., are gross awarenesses. The second category of subtle minds refers to the awarenesses that become active while we're asleep, when we're fainting, during the initial stages of death, and for advanced practitioners on the completion stage of highest yoga tantric practice. These minds depend less on the physical bodies, and their objects are more subtle. Examples are dream consciousnesses. And then there's the third category of the subtlest consciousness, which are referred to as the clear light mind. This is the awareness that in the case of ordinary living beings becomes active only at the time of death. A similar version becomes active when you're asleep, but just briefly, and exists without depending on the physical body. It can exist independently of the body. Advanced practitioners on the completion stage of highest yoga tantra can manifest the subtle clear light mind also through meditation. According to the tantric scriptures, all awarenesses are mounted on energy winds, which in turn flow through the energy channels in our body. Okay, so that's the explanation of these different channels. No need to read through those. And so there are also these energy channels that go through the body. They come together at different places, and those are called chakras. They kind of knot it together. So you have this in other traditions too, also in the Buddhist tradition. So these are like where the energy centers come together at different areas in the body. And those are described as chakra. Chakra means wheel. They look like wheels. You know, if you have little different things knotted together and then stretch them, looks like a wheel. So the very subtle mind, okay, that's the description of the energy system in the body. Chinese medicine, for instance, is based on that. But the very subtle mind, that's our essential mind. That's the mind that travels from one life to the next. Okay, that's the one that goes on. But that's not the one that is active right now. So if you wonder, is that the actual I? Well, it's not active right now, but the I is active. Okay. So that is called the root mind. It's located at the center of our heart, which is interesting. It's actually located there because the energy is located here. And oftentimes we point at the heart as like I, pointing at the heart. So there seems to be an instinctive sense that this is where the essential mind lies. And that is the one that continues from one light to the next. So as an ordinary living being, and we're just going through it quickly, we're not able to utilize this mind. We're not aware of it. When it arises, it does so without there being any ability to utilize it to meditate on. the only exception to this may be when someone experiences lucid dreams, when one is aware that one is dreaming, and possibly able to actively participate in. So this is not talking about the very subtle mind, but you can actually train yourself in lucid dreaming where you start able to at least control the subtler mind. But that is not necessarily spiritual. It doesn't have to be. Only when you transform it into like using your dreaming mind into a meditating mind, if you're actually meditating with it, then it becomes a spiritual practice. And the same is true for the very subtle mind. You use it to meditate. That's what they do when they die. So you're trying to use not just the gross mind, but also the subtle mind to meditate with it. All right. So, all right. I don't think we need to go through all this. You can read this on your own. Okay, this is enough. So just that you know, there are these different types of awareness, and the subtle mind is really interesting. So it tells you a lot more about the mind if you also read a little bit about that, if you're interested, and get to know you have that subtle mind, which potentially you can access. Okay? And in that way gain more control, and are very effectively able to eliminate many of the afflictive emotions. Yeah?
When I was in Bodhgaya, there was Kalachakra, and after Kalachakra, there's this practice called
Poa.
And I understood I didn't do it, but a friend of mine did it, and she said that she was able to be aware of her dreaming. Can you explain about it?
No, that takes too long. Sorry. I don't know. I mean, you don't need to do paw. Paw is like when someone dies, a lama can help you to transform the consciousness in a way that you're reborn in a better place. I mean, but it's not. There's no guarantee that it happens. And the best paw is said to generate bodhicitta. And that as a result of that you can become a lucid dreamer, I don't think that's enough. There must have been something else that the person is able to do this, so I don't know. Okay. All right, sorry, just because I thought to do another meditation. 10 more minutes? Do we have time? Okay. All right, now I've sped through it. I apologize for that, but at least I have a sense we've completed that part. Okay. And what I'd like you to do